Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the joint session of the Standing Committee on Sustainable Development, Sustainability, and the Standing Committee on UN Affairs. I encourage everyone, I think everyone's followed the right protocol with their country name and then their first and last name. We will be taking a speakers list. I know some people have indicated they wish to speak on the second session, so you could put that in the chat to me directly or to everyone. Otherwise, put your hand up by raising the green hand to indicate that you'd like to make a question, pose a question or make a comment to one of our panelists. I'll now turn over to Senator Juan Carlos Romero, the president of the IPU Committee on UN Affairs, who's joining us from Argentina. Senator, the floor is yours. Do we have the senator? There's Senator Romero joining us now. Senator, welcome. I'll remind everybody that interpretation is available in many languages, and to just above the senator's head, you'll see the option of changing your interpretation there. Senator, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Como presidente del Comité Permanente de Asuntos de las Naciones de la IPU, es un placer poder presidir esta sesión en conjunto con mi colega, la senadora Verónica Musenda, presidenta del Comité de Desarrollo Sostenible de la IPU. Nuestros dos comités se reúnen hoy conjuntamente porque abordan el mismo asunto, correspondiente al tema principal de la Asamblea: superar la pandemia hoy y construir un mañana mejor. Antes de continuar con esta importante discusión, debemos aprobar la agenda de nuestros respectivos comités. En nombre del Comité Permanente de Naciones Unidas de la IPU, permítame solicitarles que adoptemos la agenda del comité que ha sido compartida con todos los miembros de la IPU en el periodo de esta asamblea. Gracias. A continuación, quisiera preguntarles, solicitarles la aprobación del acta de nuestra última sesión de Belgrado de octubre del 2019. No habiendo objeciones, queda aprobada la señalada. Senadora Musenda, le pediría si es tan amable de presentar y continuar con los anuncios relativos al comité.
Sí, me dice que usted no tiene. Doctor, dice que la senadora... No.
I wish to ask the members if the approved agenda of this committee which was also shared with all IPU members in lead to this assembly. Thank you. Now, let me give you a sense of how we will proceed today. To make our discussion more manageable, Senator Romero and I have agreed to split the session in two parts. He will chair the first part for the next 90 minutes until about 3:30 p.m. Geneva time, which will deal with the first two questions on the program, namely, the question about the recovery from the pandemic and the green economy, and the question about multilateral cooperation to prevent new crises. I will chair the second part of the session starting in about an hour and a half and until the end of the session. This discussion will focus exclusively on the third point on our program about vaccines accessibility as a public good. Both segments will be introduced by renowned experts on these issues. After their interventions, the floor will be given to you to ask questions or express views on the subject. As prescribed by the rules, your intervention will need to be limited to 2 minutes. I invite you all to observe this time allocation so that as many people as possible get an opportunity to speak. I will unfortunately have to leave you as we have an important vote scheduled in Parliament. I'm leaving you in the very able hands of Ms. Slivia Dinica, our Bureau member from Romania, who will co-chair the rest of the proceedings with Senator Romero. Senator Romero, over to you, sir.
Muchas gracias, senadora Mosenda.
Very much, Senator Mosenda.
Para nuestro primer debate de hoy escucharemos a 3 presentadores.
For our first discussion today,
El académico de renombre,
presenters,
Tim Jackson, del Reino Unido, la senadora Sherry Rickman, de Pakistán, y Agnes Kalibata, enviada especial de las Naciones Unidas para la Cumbre sobre Sistemas Alimentarios para el 2021. Luego de las 3 presentaciones, exposiciones, invitaré a todos aquellos que deseen hacer preguntas o comentarios o hablar durante 2 minutos. Esa es la limitación de tiempo. Y pueden solicitar la palabra haciendo uso del icono correspondiente que señala una mano en la pantalla. El profesor Tim Jackson, director del Centro para la Comprensión de la Prosperidad Sostenible de la Universidad de Surrey, es un economista ecológico que, con una extensa lista de libros de su autoría. También es un experto dramaturgo, o sea que nos puede expresar seguramente los conceptos, no solo con sus ideas, sino también desde el corazón. Su último libro se titula Post-Growth, Life After Capitalism, lo que ya el título atrae a leerlo, y nos dice mucho de la perspectiva que el profesor está ejerciendo y que nos expondrá en este debate. Profesor Jackson, tiene usted la palabra. Trate de hacerlo. Ya bloquealo.
Hello, everyone. We seem to be having a little bit of a connection problem with Professor Jackson. If I could ask you, Senator Romero, to ask Ms. Senator Raymond, if she could join us now,
Okay.
then we can come back to Senator Jackson. Thank you.
Okay, yes. Same happened to me. We can follow the Dr. Jackson position. Le daré la palabra ahora a la senadora Sheryl Rickman. La senadora Rickman es miembro de la mesa del Comité de Desarrollo Sostenible de la IPU y ha tenido una carrera política realmente importante y distinguida. Gabinete y líder del partido. Dirigió la Media Luna Roja de Pakistán y fue embajadora de Pakistán en los Estados Unidos. Senadora Rickman, tiene usted la palabra. Gracias.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me. Are we good with sound? I just need to get a yes. Okay, I think we're we're on. Yes, thank you very much to the two committees of the IPU for organizing this very. I believe I have 5 to talk about a great deal of issues. One of them being, of course, the idea and the imperatives of multilateralism in a world that has responded badly to a polypandemic that keeps recurring in different waves. Now, from Pakistan, I have to report that we are still in the trenches in all of South Asia, especially India. You all may have heard of the crisis there, both of mortality and morbidity, that has caught the economy and the health infrastructure entirely unprepared, despite facing off with the first wave. And we in Pakistan are bracing similar dimensional trauma to we are doing our best as we speak to gear up for facilities and create emergency procedures as build some resilience for the that is still in very waves in South Asia. To do, I'm going to ask of we see besetting multilateral that we see besetting the world that was again unprepared for such a crisis, and also how we can treat this pandemic as an opportunity. And I will quote here John Kennedy, President John Kennedy, who said that when written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of 2 characters. One represents danger, the other represents opportunity. So I think all leaders always look at crisis as a moment of opportunity. Where do we see ourselves going? Multilateral system. First of all, I think the pandemic and its third wave is a clear signal to the international community and all of humanity to rethink recent policies that look at borders as 20th century creations. 20th century creations treated borders as immutable and did not look beyond the nationalisms of the era. Today, we are back in an era of economic nationalism despite a whole wave of. And the dangers, of course, are that pandemics, climate stress, other vulnerabilities no longer recognize borders. And we have in front of us a policy straitjacket at the multilateral level, at regional levels, and for countries that have not reset their priorities in strategic ways to combat this erosion in the multilateral system. And developing countries, of course, are the first to be hit by this level of, by this political microclimate of, stopgap, uncoordinated decision making, where multilateralism is not really treated as the first agent of global governments. Now, global governance is crucial, but it is also a misnomer because it implies that there is an existing infrastructure that is both funded, resourced, valued, and respected as a system that we put in place, say, after the Second World War, but it has, as we all know, fallen by the wayside. South Asia, for instance, is one of the biggest victims of the failure of countries talking to each other and of even the United Nations. Both, for instance, are nuclear countries. One right now, my country, Pakistan, has no vaccine. We have not been able to produce it, and we have yet to vaccinate 1% of our population while bracing for a tsunami. India has no oxygen. While posting some of the highest numbers, I mean, confirming more than 16.9 million cases to date, and more than 200,000 deaths. So for 3 consecutive days, India has recorded the world's highest number of new virus cases, while Pakistan is also looking at a peak where critical patient care is 30% higher than what it was during the peak in June 2020. So really, this presents a poignant failure of cooperation across borders. It points towards the failures of economic and other nationalisms that we have seen come to the fore, even from the biggest global leaders. And I mentioned the United States, which has just released a vaccine for India, but Pakistan has been receiving vaccine donations from the People's Republic of China. That we are looking at a parliamentary oversight collapse as well, because the first thing pandemics do is they drive members out of buildings and centers they congregate to make crucial policy. And while we are able to work at Zoom, there is still a stalemate on many of us agreeing to the efficacy and legality of climate, of parliaments working for either the pandemic or climate change or anything, any critical policy making, whether it be providing employment or creating a stimulus package for which there is no money, of course, or even discussing multinational policies. Now, one of the multinational organizations internationally is the IMF. And its package, for instance, right now with represented a crisis, a moral crisis of capitalism because of the onerous burden of indirect taxation, despite sustainability built into its program and SDGs built into its program. Parliament is not able to exercise oversight. And I would like to ask this forum and the IPU to please write to chairmen of parliamentary houses and to speakers of parliamentary chambers to ensure that whether it be by Zoom or methods, parliamentary oversight over emergency, they be medical or economic or infrastructural, be created ASAP for parliaments to exercise their right and to speak about their populations that need urgent protection. So we are in a situation where vulnerable groups such as women, labor, peasants are particularly, even religious minorities are particularly at risk because of women, for instance, do not have, and groups at risk, groups that are working still in the construction, daily wage earners, marginalized groups, a huge percentage of the population will not have access to any vaccine even when it lands in Pakistan. The point being that there are policies that put us in straitjackets when we try to reach out to large percentages of the vulnerable population, those who are, especially women, who are doubly at risk. Many women don't have ID cards. These are identity cards that are required for vaccination or for any other measures. Now, these are important barriers for the population on any serious scale. And I think these are being brought up, these are being faced in every country. The question of building resilience for population post-COVID situation, I know is your subject, but particularly in South Asia, we are in the front lines and we are in the trenches of a very deadly third wave. So forgive me if I speak about medical emergencies and the need for vaccine nationalism. I know that's another session for that to be reviewed urgently. We do appreciate the COVAX system, which is set up by the multilateral agencies and WHO's cope with this level of emergency, something that we were still caught unawares for. I have not really learned from the first or second waves. It is something that we need to budget for and plan for in the future. Our populations, even in Africa, are nowhere close to either vaccination, nor are they able to protect their populations with the health infrastructure that is needed. Many countries, including Pakistan, are not even 1% of their GDP. Yes, please.
Excuse me, Senator, we are running out of time.
Okay. So I'll just end here by saying that again, many countries of the Asia Pacific are also looking towards the climate change conferences and multilateralism leadership on that end, because we as economies are facing down. Even Pakistan is the 5th most vulnerable country to climate stress, and our vulnerable populations right now have no recourse to any remedial sense of recovery or any infrastructure that can cope with a post-COVID future. Thank you very much. I can't hear.
Jackson, we are able to for your speech. Thank you very much. Professor Jackson, are you able to follow this?
Do you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you very well. Thank you very much.
That's a apologies for those technical difficulties. And in some ways, I'm pleased that I managed to hear a little bit of Senator Raymond's speech before I gave mine. I want to emphasize some of the points that she's made, and I want to start with what is quite an obvious point in a sense, particularly as we come out of a global pandemic, that there is an essential element of our prosperity which is concerned with human health, with our health, with the care of human life. And 200 years ago, the 3rd president of the United States made exactly that point when he said that the care and not their destruction is the first and only task of government. It is, in a sense, the core element of our prosperity. And we made obvious decisions in defense of that element of our prosperity as the pandemic struck, in closing down certain aspects of our economies and in trying to protect health at all costs. And there's a distinct lesson in that, a very clear lesson, that there are times at which prosperity is about health than about wealth. And I think that's a lesson that matters for a couple of reasons. The first is that when you think about health as a metaphor for prosperity, you realize that it's actually balance rather than endless growth that creates the sense of what prosperity is. Of course, there are places in the world which have too little nutrition, too little access to clean water, too little in the way of safe shelter, too little security, not the right kind of livelihood, in some cases very precarious livelihoods. And in those places, it really is important to have more, to think about prosperity in terms of growth. But there are other places actually where we have to think about prosperity as having less material consumption, less carbon emissions, less damage to the environment, less consumerism, perhaps less materialism in the way we think about our society and our vision of social progress. Sense of balance, it seems to me, that goes missing, particularly in capitalism. Capitalism has ingrained at its heart the idea of eternal growth that will deliver more and more for everyone all of the time. And that vision has also undermined financial stability. And in many places, it's making the livelihoods of ordinary people very precarious. And that, to me, becomes obvious when you think what an economy would look like. Principle, it would be an economy of care. And it would be the care workers. It would be those who provided our basic needs in everyday life. It would be those who looked after us. It would be those who looked after our old people. It would be those who looked after the most vulnerable in society, who would be the most valuable, the front line. The people who actually saved our lives on many occasions would be the people that we value most in society. That didn't happen. It didn't happen. In fact, almost the opposite happened. Those people became the most precarious in society. Their jobs were underpaid, insecure. They didn't have the security of livelihoods and the luxury of having more and more. They had targets that were almost unmeetable in many cases. Their experiences through the pandemic have been horrific in many cases. And their fate as a sector of our population, as the most vital sector of our population, has been under threat, not just through the pandemic, not just in the decade between the financial crisis and the pandemic, but actually systematically over a period of many decades. That sector of care for society, the maintenance of our basic needs and our level of being able to survive and to flourish, that care of human life and not its destruction and happiness, that had become the most fragile part of the capitalist economy. Now, I'm saying this because this, to me, is how we have to focus on the recovery. We have to think of the mechanisms through which that sector becomes, as it is, the most vital sector in our society. We have to think of the ways in which we protect the livelihood. And we have to devise economic strategies and protects those workers in delivering what is the most vital function in our prosperity. It's not a trivial question. And to me, this is why Senator Ribeiro at the beginning mentioned my book, and the subtitle of the book being, Life After Capitalism. I do think we have to think beyond capitalism. And I want to say a little bit about why that is. Why is it that those care workers found themselves marginalized in society? Why was it that our investments in health and care were insufficient to protect us from a global pandemic? And if we can begin to think about the reasons for that, it seems to me, then we can begin to think about what recovery has to mean, what an economics after the pandemic has to look like. And I want to point to this critical structural feature of capitalism that has made the protection of care more and more difficult. And it is essentially a fixation on the idea of labor productivity growth, the pursuit of ever more productive output from each hour of a person's time working in the economy. Now, that labor productivity growth has done some great things. I don't want to try and make the case that capitalism hasn't delivered in some places a great deal of wealth and a great deal of material. But that of labor productivity works best in the manufacturing of material goods that are sold through profit-making businesses into increasingly growing markets. It works much less well when it comes to the economy of care. Why? Actually, the answer is very, very, very simple. In those professions, like the care profession, it is the time that people put in to caring for their patients, to looking after the elderly, to looking after kids. It's time that is of the essence in the value of that service to society. When you start asking nurses to see more patients, or doctors to see more patients, or carers to look after more people, or teachers to teach more children, you end up actually undermining the value of that work in that sector. Instead, what typically happens is that those care workers are underpaid, the care systems are underfunded, and we end up in exactly the situation that led to the dangers of the pandemic. I don't have time really to talk about all the solutions, but it does seem to me that as parliamentarians, as people interested in government, that injunction from Jefferson from 200 years ago to take seriously the idea of health as the element, as the fundamental basis of prosperity, and care as the mechanism in the economy that protects that health, there a priority to think about the kinds of mechanisms that will support the workers who will create that sector of our economy and let it flourish into the future. And I'm just going to finish on a fairly obvious point in a way. When we think about the green economy, often we think about workers building solar panels and wind turbines and clever technology. Actually, it turns out when you crunch the numbers that it is that sector of care, that sector where time rather than materials is the basis for the value of that sector. That is the green economy. Moving towards this economy of care, which prioritizes health, is at the same time the best way to deliver an economy that stays within planetary boundaries and allows for the future of our children. Care of people, care of planet, both go together. It's a challenging situation. It's a difficult situation, but it's one, I think, where we take inspiration from actually a conservationist whose work I love, a man called Wendell Berry. And he once said, human and earthly limits, properly understood, are not confinements, but rather inducements, invitations to fullness of relationship and meaning. This care economy, I would argue, is a better economy than the one built around profit maximization, materialism, endless consumerism, and the inequality that comes. Economy actually is one in which all of us can flourish. And I'll finish on that point.
Thank you very much, Professor Jackson. Your response is rich, and I hope it will prompt a good number of questions. Thank you very much again. We are presenting the next speaker, a Rwandan agricultural scientist and policymaker and president of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. She's Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources. The United Nations Secretary General has appointed her to lead the process for the Food System Summit that will take place in New York in September. The IPU will organize a parliamentary meeting in the lead up to the summit. We have invited her to give us an illustration of something that's very important in our development model, and that needs fixing urgently, named the food produced, marketed, and the food consumed. About food, her experience, Ms. Ms. Kalibata is on the floor.
Hello, Senator. We're just having some technical issues, and our student, one of our people is helping. I think their microphone is open. If the student could close their microphone. I understand that Ms. Kalabata is here. Can I suggest that we move to the speakers and that when we're ready to go, I know we have intervention requests from Saudi Arabia and from France and from Japan. So if we could go to Saudi Arabia and have their intervention now while we still have Mr. Jackson as well, that would be great. And I think Senator Raymond is also still on the line. Saudi Arabia, over to you.
Yeah. Good afternoon. As we are facing and combating a global health crisis that is spreading human suffering and affecting global economies, we all agree that the environment protection is a key factor in avoiding future pandemics that might emerge more often. A call for solidarity and collaboration through transfer of knowledge and sharing experience is a must. Saudi Arabia has made measurable actions in reducing emissions through tailor-made programs and strategies, striking balance between stimulating the economic growth, sustainable development, and innovation. Green Saudi and Green Middle East initiative aim to plant 50 billion trees in Saudi Arabia and across the Middle East, cutting carbon dioxide emissions in the region by 60%. These initiatives are examples of applying circular economy based on the 4 R's: reduction, reuse, removal, and recycling. As we are planning to increase the share of renewables in the kingdom energy mix to 50% by 2030, Saudi Arabia is exploring new technologies in the use of hydrogen as a source of energy. We are setting a huge green hydrogen-based ammonia production facility. We are exploring areas such as carbon capture, utilization, and storage to achieve low carbon intensity of oil production. Saudi Aramco initiative on circular economy has won the 2021 Leading Circular Economy Award from the European Foundation of Quality Management, as they have many actions in the field. Among them was the participation setting up of a venture capital fund that has invested in startups developing innovative technology to reduce greenhouse emissions. These are some examples of our plans and practices that will not succeed without our partners all over the world. That's why we are calling for solidarity against this, to tackle this issue. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Por favor.
Gracias, Senator. I will now turn to France. Je pense qu'il y a un député de France maintenant. Véronique Riotin. After this, we will hear from Japan and then Iran, if you can be ready. There is just a technical second or two while the person's video and microphone comes up. So you can see that the order is France, then Japan.
Oui, ça marche.
Ah, bonjour.
Bonjour à tous.
Oui.
Bonjour, Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Président. Moi, je souhaite témoigner en tant que députée française de ce que la France a mis en place pour sortir de la crise actuelle. Le gouvernement a présenté en septembre dernier un plan de relance ambitieux pour redresser durablement notre économie, la rendre plus vertueuse et en même temps performante. Ce que la France propose, c'est de changer de modèle économique, de soutenir l'investissement pour accompagner une mutation profonde vers l'économie de demain, décarbonée et économe en ressources. Au moment où nous affrontons une crise économique et sociale majeure, le choix de l'écologie et de la relance verte nous apparaît comme une source d'espoir pour tous. Doté de 100 milliards d'euros, le plan de relance de la France fait de la transition écologique un objectif stratégique en consacrant 30 milliards d'euros exclusivement aux investissements verts. Il soutient la transformation écologique de tous les secteurs qui sont fortement émetteurs de gaz à effet de serre. Il s'agit des transports, des bâtiments, de l'énergie, de l'industrie ou encore de l'agriculture. Il vise également chacune des cibles, entreprises, locales, ménages, et nous faisons le pari d'une véritable transformation structurelle de notre économie. Nous ambitionnons de décarboner notre industrie en réduisant nos émissions de carbone de 40% d'ici 2030. Nous voulons soutenir nos secteurs d'avenir en misant sur les technologies vertes telles que l'hydrogène, le recyclage, les biocarburants. Nous favorisons le développement d'activités à forte valeur ajoutée, créatrices d'emplois, valorisant les savoir-faire et encourageant de ce fait des transformations qui rendront l'économie plus compétitive. Le Parlement français, qui a largement voté ces mesures, veillera à sa traduction budgétaire sur au moins 2 années. Le Premier ministre s'est par ailleurs engagé à rendre compte au Parlement de l'exécution de ce plan de relance tous les 2 mois. Voilà ce que je voulais vous partager ce jour en matière de relance de l'économie verte. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. I will now turn to the delegate from Japan. Remember that we have Senator Raymond and Professor Jackson with us. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment directly on what they presented, you're more than welcome to do that. Hello, sir. The floor is yours.
はい、日本国参議院議員の新藤兼彦です。発言の機会をいただき、皆様に感謝いたします。講演者パネリストの方々の発言に敬意を表しつつ、私からコメントいたします。今般の新型コロナウイルス感染症のパンデミックは、日本において農林水産業や食品関連産業に大きな影響を与えております。国際情勢を見ても、一部の食料輸出局による輸出規制や感染拡大による生産物流の停滞など、パンデミックがもたらす食料安全保障上の課題が浮き彫りになりました。パンデミックにおいては、まずは冷静な行動に努めることが肝要であります。そして各国は平時から可能な限り自国内で食料の安定供給を図る具体的な政策を進めるべきと考えます。2019年にアフガニスタンで凶弾に倒れた中村哲医師を紹介します。アフガニスタンでは医療活動に従事していた中村医師は、病気の背景には食料不足による栄養失調があると考えて、100の診療所より1本の用水路とその考えのもとに灌漑用の用水路を建設しました。そして砂漠には緑地を回復させ、65万人の人々の食料の自給自足を可能にしました。中村医師は目の前の課題を解決するためには、その根本的原因を見定めて、中長期的な観点から粘り強く物事に取り組むことの重要性を示してくれたものと思います。パンデミックを克服し、国際的な食料安全保障を強化するためには、中村医師が示したように、対症療法ではなく、根本的な原因を解決する必要があると考えます。農業食料セクターの持続可能性を高め、安定した食料供給、フードサプライチェーンの機能を維持強化するため、私自身、議会人として必要な立法措置、行政監視の責任を果たしてまいりたいと思っております。どうもありがとうございます。
Thank you very much, Mr. Shindo. I believe we have, fittingly, you commented on food supply, and I believe that we do have Agnes Kalabata on the line now. We will try to go to her before I turn to Iran and Canada. If I could see if we can get Agnes Kalabata, if we can try and have her join the line now. I'm not sure if we'll have the slides, but if we could get her to join us, we can always send out the slides afterwards to people. Sometimes the system doesn't like a whole lot of input, so we definitely want to have the speaker herself. If I could get Agnes on the line. Oh, I think, nope, that's Iran. Okay, over to you, Doctor.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you hear me? No?
We do hear you, but there's a lot of background noise. If you could put in earphones, that might clean up the sound.
Okay, so is this good?
Okay,
Is it good now?
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm here as Iranian MP and would like to thank all attendees of this session. Undoubtedly, the need to achieve the goal of sustainable development is felt more and more these days because some of the basic principles related to them, namely increasing social participation, facilitate global access to public health services and pharmaceutical, as well as coordinated planning and action around the world, are among the most vital factors of cooperation to control the outbreak of COVID-19. Moreover, achieving the goals of sustainable development can help overcome the economic crisis caused by the spread of this deadly virus and set the world on path to economic crisis caused by the spread of this deadly, path to a bright and green future. For this reason, parliaments are expected to urge their respective governments to take more effective actions against the coronavirus by reforming their healthcare systems domestically and as well as internationally, and to push for equitable distribution of medical and pharmaceutical facilities and equipment needed by all countries across the world. From a different perspective, it is an undeniable fact that the outbreak of COVID-19 has created additional obstacles to achieving the goals of sustainable development, but it also seems to have created certain privileges for cities and their residents. Lockdowns imposed around the world have led to a remarkable reduction in carbon dioxide emissions, and even in some parts of the world, temperatures have decreased significantly. However, it must be acknowledged that the short-term effects of COVID-19 on environmental goals and biodiversity remain unclear. Meanwhile, what is certain is that we must continue to emphasize continuation of economic activities while ensuring the use of environmental friendly paradigms. Finally, I should emphasize that rich countries must live up to the expectations and help improve the conditions quickly in the post-pandemic world by strengthening public investments and assisting various development funds established by international and regional organizations. In this regard, these governments are expected to help other countries in the next few years to overcome the domestic problems caused by COVID-19 and to minimize the negative effects of the pandemic on the world economy and global trade by significantly increasing their financial assistance and investments. They are expected to enhance their assistance through bilateral and multilateral agreements so that by focusing on strengthening the existing infrastructure to promote entrepreneurship, they can help urban economies prosper faster and create more paths to achieving sustainable development
Thank you.
goals.
Shukran.
Thank you.
Shukran. And if I can encourage you to send your comments to speeches@ipu.org. I will turn to Canada. We have another Agnes who's posted a question in the comment. Agnes Mulder from Netherlands has posed a question to Professor Jackson. Sorry, Dr. Reza Khan, can you mute your microphone for me? And I will pull up Canada, Senator McPherson. But I note that the Netherlands, Agnes has posted a question. Can you please provide 3 policy examples that maybe make the first steps towards a more balanced and restored society? Thank you. And Senator McPherson, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists and to everyone who's contributed. I have a question to both panelists, and although I very much appreciated your remarks, I wonder if you could focus more specifically on women and youth. Youth in particular. We've had a tremendous response from young people around the world making the linkage between the climate crisis and what the pandemic impacts are going to be on this. So I'd very much welcome your thoughts on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator McPherson. It's terrific to have the reminder of youth and women, which we haven't had much focus on at this point. I now have a question from Germany, and then I'll turn to Professor Jackson and Senator Raymond directly.
Thank you.
If I could please have Germany. The system does take a couple of seconds that are rather awkward for everybody. But if I can get, and I think your microphone is still open, Senator. If I can get Germany. Well, how about this? If we can queue up Germany, and if we cannot, if we can please queue up our next 2 panelists, or sorry, not the 2 panelists, the 2 panelists from before, Professor Jackson and Senator Raymond. If we could queue one or both of them up, and we can go to them for responses to what they've heard so far, and specifically to the Netherlands and to Canada, where Senator Mary Lou McPherson has posed a question. There's Mr. Jackson. Welcome.
Hi, let me just check my microphone's working this time.
You're good. Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you for those questions. I mean, one of the interesting things about an economy that bases itself around the concept of care is that actually it is mostly women who are working in that sector. I'm not saying that's as it should be, but it does tend to be the case that when you begin to protect care workers and think about their livelihood, automatically actually addressing gender inequalities, which are devastating in many places. The question about youth is also absolutely paramount. After the financial crisis, I remember traveling particularly in Southern Europe, where youth reached 50 to 60%, and that is an extraordinary waste of talent. It's a dangerous social situation because it creates a whole generation, a cohort of people without something to do in society, without a sense of meaning and purpose, without an income, without a livelihood, and I believe it's incredibly dangerous for political stability. So, you know, it is a priority, it seems to me, coming out of the pandemic, to put in place mechanisms that protect youth, protect women workers, protect those workers on the lowest livelihoods. And so to come to the how you do that question that Agnes raised from the net, there are a variety of different ways of thinking about this. So one of the ways, and it's a way that goes right back to what happened in the Great Depression, idea of governments investing in jobs for people, a job guarantee And you might think of the government almost as one economist, Hyman Minsky, called it, employer of last resort. It has to be the case. And we've seen that the mechanisms exist to do that through the pandemic, the furlough schemes, the protection of livelihood, the interventions of government to protect the livelihoods of people as we come out of this pandemic, and particularly to protect the livelihoods of the most vital people in society and to protect the livelihoods of kids, is incredibly important. So those schemes like job guarantees, universal basic services, income policies that may need to tax from some of the places that are profiting from the dividends that come from scientific green economy into that care sector. They must go back into the livelihoods of ordinary people, it seems to me. So that's too little to really get a sense of a decent discussion, but there is quite a lot of literature out about the kinds of mechanisms that would support this economy of care, and in particular would support the livelihoods of women and protect our youth actually from what could be almost a lost generation in terms of their opportunities. And in doing that, it doesn't just bring a whole sector of the population into the economy in a productive way. What also it does is it gives those young people, a sense of meaning and purpose in the world that's absolutely vital to the stability of society.
Thank you so much, Professor Jackson. Senator Raymond.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. It's been a very engaging and eye-opening session. Thank you for hosting this again. Quickly, you asked how we can specifically ensure women and children are not left out of recovery programs and the green recovery we're talking about. The care economy is, as you know, absolutely run by women, at least in South Asia, as well as the fact that most of the frontline paramedic workers and even immunizers here in Pakistan for polio programs, which are still, polio is still running in Pakistan, is still prevalent. So we have women both as healthcare frontline workers, as well as care economy resources, and they are mostly not documented. So one of the things that we have created as a specific intervention in protection programs and social protection programs for women, that it targets women in a monetary and cash transfer, number one. So all cash transfers in times of crisis, or even for those under the poverty line of a certain, really lowest quintile, are given to women householders. So if there's a household that is struggling and has defined itself as in need, and it fits the category of those in need and social protection, emergency social protection, or even sustained social protection from the state, will only be eligible if it's able to file on behalf of its woman householder. So that is one of the things that has actually changed the lives of many women. It's made them they've made identity cards, they have become citizens that are recognizable by the state, they now vote, they are also eligible for other benefits, including the health cards. Secondly, I think it's important to also look at not just legislative frameworks, but how existing laws that protect children and women on the edges of vulnerability and on the edges of several disasters, and we have a situation in South Asia, specifically in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, where women are extremely vulnerable and close to nurturing obviously a more greener livelihood, because they are the ones that fetch the water. They're the ones that are also doubly vulnerable, and they bear a double burden. They're also householders as well as caregivers, and the economic, shall we say, bread earners of their family, which is very endemic in rural South Asia. And in this scenario, I think what's important is that multilateral programs that do come in, even aid programs, bilateral aid programs that come into these economies, must and should recognize and target women as the core recipients. Women automatically cascade down their benefits to children, as we all know, while men tend to spend that on the weekend, either even if it's in the UK or Pakistan or India, at the bar or somewhere else, or, or on themselves. That is a norm that we have documented. So I think targeting women in aid programs is crucial for both recovery as well as social protection. And it's entirely possible. We have the infrastructure. The World Bank has also recognized it as the gold standard of social protection. The program. So here's one of the ways.
Thank you so much, Senator. It was great to have that intervention. We have, as you know, had some difficulty reaching Rwanda. We do hope that Senator Raymond and Professor Jackson can still stay with us for a few more minutes. We do have a wonderful fellow named Martin Frick ready to step into the fray and tell us about the Food System Summit. And Mr. Frick, we did have a specific intervention from a Japanese member of the council talking about the importance of food in this time. So over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Patricia. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Martin Frick. I'm the deputy of Dr. Kalibata. She just texted me as she was unable to connect, asking me to do a short presentation. So if you can give me an indication of how much time you want to allocate to me, and I will adjust accordingly. 4 minutes, fantastic. Our food systems are broken. That is obvious because we see the hunger numbers and the numbers of malnutrition going up. We know that more than 1/3 of global emissions are basically going back on food systems, that biodiversity, water, land resources, all of them are under enormous pressure from food production. At the same time, we are wasting more than 1/3 of the food we produce. The post-harvest losses are gigantic, and at the same time we are depleting our oceans, we are losing fish stock. We are, in short, in a very critical position. The Food System Summit is basically there to change the global narrative, to change the global perception around food systems and the central importance for that. And I believe that IPU is central in doing that for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, we have been building an innovative structure of the summit by which it's not only a day in time, but we have been working with, by now, 105 countries all over the planet doing national level food system summit dialogues. These include not only the ministries of agriculture, but really should provide an all of government and an all of society approach. And this is where IPU's participation is so incredibly valuable. Because no matter of the governing majority, we need all the parliamentarians to understand and to connect on the central importance on food systems, to support the building of national action plans, but also on national multi-stakeholder platforms to tackle the issues related around food systems. We have also the instrument of independent dialogues, which are also part of our Food System Summit preparation, which have been taken on by many, many organizations worldwide. I just came in when the lady from Pakistan spoke about women and gender, and I could not agree more. I have been the gender expert at the German mission in New York for many years. And if you look at the Security Council resolution on women, peace and security, for example, it gives you all the story about the vulnerability. But also gender empowerment is one of the key instruments really to turn our food systems around. And for that, we need national action. We need national parliaments to pay due attention to what is being needed and to empower that. So let me end by saying, in addition to the 2 types of dialogues, we are also running a whole set of global level dialogues on women, on oceans, on innovation, on water, on all of these key issues, because ultimately what we are trying to do is to build a global community for food systems transformation, but also many, many hundreds and thousands local communities where people do come together and solve the food systems issue in a holistic way. Let me end by inviting you also to digitally participate in what we are doing. I will put the web resources in the chat box. There are many possibilities to be engaged with us, and we are very much looking forward to working with IPU in the future. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you for that very well-timed intervention, and also for putting that link in our chat. We are having a food systems summit on June 23rd with your team, so we look forward to many MPs, parliamentarians participating on that front. I believe I now have, sorry, I have our friend from Thailand, who it's very late in the night, but welcome, welcome to you for your intervention. You have 2 minutes.
Madam President, Mr. President, IPU colleagues. While the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted and worsened systematic inequalities, and some may say it even widening gap between the SDGs and their implementations, the global crisis has, on the other hand, created opportunities to rethink global interdependence. The elements of borders and boundaries has become clear. No country can solve this problem alone. As the COVID crisis has set us back in our progress in many dimensions, including SDGs, the economic recovery efforts that will return to business as usual will not suffice. Sustainable recovery policies that can build back better need to promote investment and behavioral changes that will promote society resilience. In our efforts to build back better, Thailand stresses the importance of supporting local economies, digital development, and the promotion of the agricultural sector by ensuring food security, strengthening community businesses, and fostering sustainability of grassroots economies. Bio-circular economy, or BCG, is a business model that Thailand used to promote sustainable growth that is environmentally friendly and inclusive. COVID-19 has shown that the global health architecture and social protection systems are severely underinvested, and national health systems must be extended to protect the whole population, especially the most vulnerable groups. Thailand's ability to cope with the crisis largely relies on our robust healthcare system, and we are ready to share our experience in this area with our friends and the international community. Last but not least, I am honored to announce that Thailand would present the second official submission of its SDG Voluntary National Review, or VNR, to the high-level political forum in New York in July this year. Thank you very much, Madam President, Mr. President, and all the colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we certainly will be happy to have information on the Thai Parliament's review of that VNR, and we will be having a session on the high-level political forum, of course, in July for parliamentarians. I'll now do an intervention from the member for UAE. I think it's Mr. Almari, who has the floor for 2 minutes. And then I will turn to Fatima from Bahrain, if I can get that. I noticed that Tim Jackson, so if I can go to Mr. Almari from UAE, and I noticed that Professor Jackson has put some comments in about the food system in the chat. Yes, I believe the UAE, Mira Al-Swadi, that you wanted to talk about vaccines. So we've turned to your colleague. If that's not correct, please let me know. Yes. Here's Fatima from Bahrain. You have 2 minutes, please.
Okay.
Your microphone is open. There you go.
أوكي. شكرا جزيلا. تحية لكم من مملكة البحرين. كان يتوقع لعام 2020 أن يمثل بداية عقد من العمل والتنفيذ من أجل التنمية المستدامة، يتم خلاله زيادة سرعة ونطاق تحقيق أهداف 17، لكن تفشي جائحة كوفيد-19 غير المسبوقة وما أحدثته من آثار كارثية في جميع أنحاء العالم جعل تحقيق هذه الأهداف أكثر صعوبة، بقدر ما جعله أكثر إلحاحاً وضرورة من أي وقت مضى، بالنظر إلى الآثار الاقتصادية والاجتماعية والإنسانية الناتجة عن جائحة التي أدت إلى تآكل الجهود المبذولة وطنياً ودولياً لإنجاز أهداف التنمية المستدامة. لكن نحاول أن نتمكن للتغلب الحكومات بمفردها من عكس ذلك الأثر، مما يفرض على المجتمع الدولي توحيد جهوده وتعبئة موارده بهدف تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. وعليه فإن إجراءات التعافي من الجائحة يجب أن تأتي ضمن منظومة شاملة من السياسات والاستراتيجيات تضاعف الجهد من أجل مواجهة الجائحة والتعافي منها. في الوقت ذاته إعادة عجلة التنمية المستدامة في مسارها الصحيح، وأن البرلمانات باختصاصها الفريد في التشريع والرقابة على أعمال السلطة التشريعية يمكن أن تكون في القلب من عملية التعافي هذه، وأن تمارس دورا شريكا ومؤثرا وفعالا في إطارها. يتعين على البرلمانات وهي بصدد مراجعة واعتماد سياسات التعافي من الجائحة أن تستهدف عكس التأثير السلبي للجائحة على ثلاثية الصحة والتعليم ومستويات الدخل. فقد شهدت أغلب الدول الغنية والفقيرة على حد سواء تراجعاً ملموساً في مجالات التنمية البشرية الأساسية، في أكبر تراجع تم تسجيله على الإطلاق، بما في ذلك ارتفاع عدد الأشخاص الذين يعانون من انعدام الأمن الغذائي وعدم المساواة. ثم جاءت الجائحة ليجد المجتمع الدولي نفسه مواجهاً بتهديدات موازية مرتبطة بالأزمات الصحية والاقتصادية والاجتماعية تركت العالم في حالة الركود. ومع بدء سياسات التعافي يتعين العمل بالتوازي على أكثر من مسار من مسارات التنمية المستدامة لتعويض الخسائر والأضرار التي تسببت فيها الجائحة، بنهج مستدام وشامل يراعي الاحتياجات الفئات الأكثر هشاشة وضعفاً في المجتمع. يتعين بشكل أساسي أيضاً.
Shukran. If you have additional comments, you can send them your entire speech to us at speeches@ipu.org, and we will put those into the record.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're now in a little bit of a time sensitivity situation. I see that Manon Aubry, our next speaker, has joined, but I would like to turn to Senator Romero to ask our two panelists, Senator Raymond and Professor Jackson, for their final concluding remarks. I know they both have somewhere else to go, so we'll have Senator Romero invite Senator Raymond and then we will turn to our French MEP Manon Aubry for the second session, and we will get through the rest of the speakers list. Thank you. Senator Romero, to you.
Sí, muchas gracias, Paddy. Tal cual Patricia lo expresó. Si hay algún comentario final por parte de los panelistas, con todo gusto lo escucharemos.
Okay, hi. Sorry, I hope you can hear. And just very quickly, I think we're hearing countries signal different things at different stages of the pandemic and recovery. The ability to manage resources at this point, I think, is critical, and be able to harness infrastructure towards the most vulnerable groups. But and I think identifying vulnerable groups is not a challenge. It is something that all economies and countries are doing. But given that I'm thinking of the multilateral system in pushing this forward, I think that the UN's offices are very important in messaging how we can go forward in building better cooperation in instead of the economic nationalism we are seeing and the vaccine nationalism we are seeing. The ability for multilateral organizations to adapt to change is also critical, and also for the larger economies that support the multilateral organizations to be sympathetic to and to be politically kind of to empathize with such change is important, because reform is clearly the need of the hour, both at the multilateral level and even within countries. And I think we need to be very clear, and I appreciate my other panelists' message that the care economy and health is really cannot be divorced from the creation of wealth, which I think he was trying to say. Wealth alone is not going to provide us with the kind of path forward that we need, either sustainable or even foreseeable. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And I see you signaling that we want to end. Let's hope we can take this from here.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be very, very, very brief. Thank you for that summary of what I was trying to say, Senator. There's a philosopher who once said that there is no wealth but life. And I think that's a very pertinent comment here. I guess, just as a final thought, it seems to me that when we're focusing on climate change, the need to reduce carbon, we've paid a lot of attention recently to the financial architecture. And we've begun to think about a financial system that supports the transition towards a net zero carbon economy. It's an essential element in the protection of the future of our kids. I think to bring together an initiative that does the same for health and the economy of care, I think it's necessary. Institutions that either prevent that economy from becoming reality, stand in the way of the livelihoods of the people who are working in it, or else alternatively, if we are creating, can construct a set of institutions, a set of rules, a set of regulations, a set of policies that will allow us to finance care in our societies properly. And I think, in climate, there's something called the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. I think we need something similar to make that happen for aspects of care. And I think that can happen, obviously, at the national level, but it could also be a really important international initiative.
Muchísimas gracias. Hemos escuchado realmente intervenciones muy interesantes, productivas. Por lo tanto, nos llama, nos motiva a seguir profundizando estos temas. Así que le agradezco al profesor Jackson, a la senadora Rickman, al señor Martín Frick, en nombre de la señora Calibata, la exposición que han realizado. Ahora, tal cual lo hemos anunciado al comienzo, invito a la señora Silvia Dínica, de la Mesa del Comité de Desarrollo Sostenible del IPU, a presentar la segunda parte de nuestra sesión de hoy, que abordará la cuestión de la accesibilidad de las vacunas como bien público, tema, por supuesto, de absoluta actualidad. Adelante, por favor, la señora Silvia Dínica.
Thank you, Senator Romero. I'm excited to chair this part of our meeting, which deals with one of the most urgent questions today. How do we guarantee that the COVID vaccine is accessible to everyone and fast enough to stop this pandemic in its tracks? Developed countries have had their problems with this, but generally they are way ahead of developing countries like mine. I'm very concerned that at this pace, billions of people in the global south will have to wait well until 2023 to get vaccinated. We must not allow that to happen. To help us make sense of this situation and give us ideas for immediate action in our own parliaments, we have invited a distinguished speaker with the history of activism behind her. She is a young member of the European Parliament, Manon Aubry, who made the news lately for her strong intervention on the floor of the Parliament, precisely on this issue. Ms. Aubry, please go ahead.
Yes, it is. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, I hope you can hear us. Please go ahead.
I do, but I was not sure you were hearing me. That's why I was waiting before speaking. If you allow me, I might speak in French, unless you all prefer me to speak in English, but it's always easier in my mother tongue. So I will switch to French now. Donc d'abord, merci beaucoup à... Ah oui, attendez, j'avais mis la traduction en anglais. Laissez-moi juste le remettre en français pour pas m'entendre en anglais derrière. Voilà. Maintenant, c'est bon. Donc, merci beaucoup à vous toutes et à vous tous pour l'invitation, pour l'organisation sur un sujet qui nous tient particulièrement à cœur et qui a fait des progrès depuis le début du point de vue de la Commission européenne et du point de vue de l'Union européenne et du Parlement européen où je siège. Nous avons alerté sans cesse, je dirais, la Commission européenne sur une stratégie qui consisterait à s'engouffrer dans la logique du marché, qui était celle qui était posée sur les vaccins, avec toute la logique de compétition, de prix qui va avec et qui comporte d'énormes dangers puisque ça limite considérablement, on le voit maintenant, l'accès aux vaccins. Et c'est pour ça que dès le moment où la question des vaccins s'est posée sur la table, nous avons avancé comme proposition la nécessité de lever les brevets, et ce pour plusieurs raisons. D'abord, l'Union européenne, mais c'est le cas aussi partout dans le monde, a injecté de l'argent public. Ces vaccins n'auraient jamais pu être développés sans investissement public dans la recherche, mais aussi les précommandes de la part des États qui ont permis aux laboratoires pharmaceutiques de développer rapidement ces vaccins. Ça, c'est la première chose. Et donc, ça nous semble une évidence, mais à partir du moment où il y a de l'argent public, les contrats d'ailleurs devraient être publics et les brevets devraient être ensuite dans le domaine public. Sur la question spécifiquement des brevets, il y a plusieurs enjeux. Il y a d'abord un enjeu d'efficacité. Si on veut venir à bout de cette pandémie, ce que je pense tout le monde veut, parce que la vie que nous vivons n'est pas durable pour personne, eh bien, il nous faut impérativement vacciner l'ensemble de la population. Et si on ne vaccine pas l'ensemble de la population en même temps, eh bien, il risque de se passer ce qu'il s'est déjà passé, c'est le développement de variants dont on n'est pas sûr que les vaccins soient suffisamment résistants, et donc l'épidémie qui revienne comme un boomerang. Et à ce titre, ce qui est frappant, et c'est pour ça aussi que nous nous battons pour la levée des brevets, c'est de voir à quel point aujourd'hui, on n'utilise pas l'ensemble de la capacité des laboratoires pharmaceutiques, puisque 47% des capacités au niveau international des laboratoires pharmaceutiques ne sont pas utilisées, ce qui veut dire que si on levait les brevets, on pourrait considérablement développer nos capacités de production. Ça, c'est sur les capacités de production en tant que telles, et qui, alors que tous les États se font la guerre les uns face aux autres pour réussir à développer suffisamment de vaccins, eh bien, nous pourrions augmenter, mettre à contribution. Je pense par exemple, moi en tant que Française, il y a un laboratoire qui s'appelle Sanofi en France et qui n'a pas conçu de vaccin et du coup n'en produit pas. Et donc, on pourrait par exemple le mettre à contribution. Et puis, je pense qu'il y a un véritable enjeu d'égalité et de solidarité. Quand je vois que plus de 80% des doses sont allées à des pays riches, alors que seulement 0,2% sont allés à des pays pauvres, je me demande si le virus auquel nous faisons face n'est pas en réalité le virus des inégalités, qui est celui qui voudrait que, en fonction de la richesse du pays et de l'état dans lequel vous vivez, vous avez le droit d'être protégé ou non. Et c'est pour ça que nous nous battons pour faire des vaccins un bien commun de l'humanité. Ça a été fait dans le passé, par exemple le vaccin contre la polio, et ça nous semble plus que jamais indispensable maintenant, ce d'autant plus qu'on sait comment le faire, on aurait les capacités de production et on pourrait largement subvenir aux besoins partout dans le monde. Et puis, je dirais que ce leitmotiv, cette demande qu'on porte politiquement depuis des mois, on n'est pas isolé. C'est aussi une demande qui est portée par les scientifiques, l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, l'Organisation des Nations unies, 400 parlementaires, il y a eu une tribune de prix Nobel, une centaine d'États, dont l'Inde. Il y a depuis ce matin la Belgique dans l'Union européenne qui s'est déclarée favorable à la levée des vaccins et qui démontre que c'est une nécessité politique, qu'il y a une demande forte qui vient de la part de nombreux acteurs politiques et que maintenant nous devons y répondre. Et je dois dire la honte que j'ai en tant qu'Européenne quand je vois que dans les négociations internationales, c'est l'Union européenne en particulier qui bloque les négociations au niveau notamment de l'Organisation mondiale du commerce pour la levée des brevets. Et tout ça pourquoi? Pour qu'une poignée de laboratoires pharmaceutiques puissent faire des profits sur la pandémie, pour que Pfizer puisse faire 30% de marge comme ils l'ont déclaré, pour que le PDG de Moderna entre dans le palmarès des milliardaires, comme ça a été annoncé il y a quelques semaines. Et c'est vrai que moi, je suis mal à l'aise à l'idée que des laboratoires puissent profiter de la pandémie pour faire des profits et pour faire pousser à l'extrême cette logique du marché qui fait que même des laboratoires comme Pfizer, par exemple, veulent profiter de cette forme de monopole pour augmenter le prix des doses qui était à 12 € initialement, qui est passé à 19 € et qui pourrait passer à 50, 100, voire 150 €. Et c'est bien toute la logique du marché, en fait, qui est remise en cause, je pense, par la crise que nous sommes en train de vivre et qui démontre la nécessité plus que jamais de faire de ces biens des biens communs de l'humanité pour les protéger, les sortir de la logique et de la prédation du marché et s'assurer qu'un maximum de personnes puissent avoir accès au vaccin et non pas une poignée de personnes qui auraient la chance de naître dans des pays riches. Et donc, c'est le sens du combat que je mène au Parlement européen au nom du groupe de la gauche que je co-préside, mais qui est un combat qui, je crois, a un écho politique, mais aussi un écho populaire beaucoup plus large, parce que ce que nous voulons, c'est aussi que les populations, les citoyens, aient voix au chapitre dans la définition de la stratégie sanitaire et de la sortie de crise à laquelle nous espérons toutes et tous. Voilà, je m'arrête là. Je crois que je suis tout juste dans mon temps qui m'était imparti.
Thank you, Ms. Aubrey. That was such a powerful statement. We will now open the floor and give an opportunity to you, members of parliament, to express yourself on this important matter. Please make sure that in your interventions, you also have questions or comments for the panel. I give the floor now to Mongolia. Please have the floor, and it will be followed by China.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Good day, my fellow parliamentarians, distinguished guests. It is my pleasure attending the IPU's Sustainable Development and the United Nations Affairs Standing Committee's joint session prior the 142nd Assembly and the 2021 High-Level Political Forum of the United Nations, and having this opportunity to share my opinion for the question of vaccine accessibility as a public good. This is a very important question indeed. I would like to raise a question regarding the uncertainty. We are all talking about whether the vaccines are effective, whether the economy will recover fast enough, whether we can be committed for efforts to combat climate change and intensify the adaptation of process. But it is increasingly clear that the uncertainty is still there. How we talk about sustainable development when there is no certainty? Therefore, I would like to encourage my colleagues, fellow members of parliaments, and parliamentarians of other countries to put our thinking into determining better certainty for the future. For example, the question is how long vaccines are going to be effective in human immune system. Does it mean that people will need the next round of vaccine in 6 months after the vaccination or 2 years after the vaccination? How long would the current vaccine hold? Therefore, to answer these questions, we collectively need to reduce the uncertainty and to think and process information so that we will have better certainty to achieve sustainable development. Currently, Mongolia is having the highest numbers of infection in a day since the beginning of the global pandemic. Through the WHO and COVAX programs, we have received vaccines and managed to inoculate over 30% of our target population. Taking this opportunity, I like to thank to the COVAX donor countries and international organizations. We all need to collaborate to overcome this global challenge. So let me finish my points by reiterating, let's all work together for better certainty. If we do not have better certainty, it is difficult to talk about sustainable development. Also, I am delighted to note that Mongolia is the country to host the next Asia-Pacific Parliamentarians Forum on Global Health with collaborations of WHO. As soon as the situation improves, my parliamentary colleagues are looking forward to meet our regional peers and continue to discuss the topic in further details, so to demonstrate how legislators can contribute to the international efforts in both producing and disseminating the vaccines. Thank you very much for your attention and wish you all good health.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to China.
Brings hope for saving life and serves as a powerful weapon to defeat COVID-19 that should be used to benefit the whole world and all humankind. China certainly adheres to first and foremost the principle of vaccine as a global public good and strives to promote the accessibility and affordability of vaccine in developing countries. So far, to help fight the pandemic, China has provided material assistance to more than 160 countries and international organizations, and is working on supplying vaccines to more than 100 countries and international organizations in various ways. That fully demonstrated China's solid commitment of making vaccine as a global public good. And it's fair to say that our action promote fair distribution of the vaccine globally, contribute to the accessibility and the affordability of the vaccines in developing countries, and strengthen global solidarity in the unprecedented fight. Therefore, we call for the international community to act together against vaccine policy politicization of vaccine nationalism. Vaccine should be used to treat disease and save life. It's not some rare commodity to profit from, or even a tool to generate immunization gap to gain advantage over one another. It is a great pity to see that some rich countries merely has their own interest in mind and ignores the legitimate right of the developing countries to access the vaccine. This will eventually jeopardize the common interest of all humankind. I sincerely hope that relevant countries take action to promote fair and reasonable distribution of vaccines, maintainability in supply chains of the anti-pandemic material, and provide humanitarian assistance to those in need, especially developing countries and their people. Only in this way can vaccine be truly people's vaccine, and we humankind defeat the pandemic as early as possible. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I give now the floor to the United Arab Emirates, and then I will invite Ms. Aubrey to take the floor since she needs to leave by 4 p.m. Geneva time. Thank you. Please, United Arab Emirates.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السيدات والسادة، على الرغم من جهود الأمم المتحدة في دعم وتسريع وصول لقاحات كوفيد-19 لجميع دول العالم بشكل شامل وميسر التكلفة، إلا أن العديد من البلدان خاصة الدول النامية والفقيرة لم تتمكن حتى اليوم من الحصول على أي لقاح. فتشير الإحصائيات الدولية إلى أن 5% فقط من سكان العالم هم من حصلوا على التطعيمات، وكان النصيب الأكبر للدول ذات الدخل المرتفع والمتوسط. فإن الوصول غير العادل للقاحات يعرض الجهود الدولية للخطر. فاعتباراً من 21 مارس 2021 كانت 78% من 447 مليون جرعة من لقاحات كوفيد-19 منتشرة في 10 دول فقط، وقد لا يتمكن ربع سكان العالم من الحصول على هذه اللقاحات قبل عام 2022. وفي هذا الشأن أود أن أشير إلى نموذج دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة في التعامل بشكل استباقي ووقائي مع أزمة كوفيد-19 من خلال أولاً توفير لقاح كوفيد-19 بشكل مجاني لجميع المواطنين والمقيمين، حيث تبلغ عدد المراكز التي تقدم التطعيمات في الدولة أكثر من 205 موقع للتطعيم. وبفضل هذه الجهود حلت دولة الإمارات في المركز الثالث عالمياً في قائمة أكثر دول العالم تطعيماً لسكانها. ثانياً إطلاق مبادرة ائتلاف الأمل من أجل الاستعداد لتسهيل ودعم توزيع 6 مليارات جرعة من التطعيمات حول العالم، مع رفع هذه القدرة إلى 18 مليار في نهاية عام 2021. ثالثاً تمرير 80% من إمدادات منظمة الصحة العالمية من خلال المدينة العالمية للخدمات الإنسانية في إمارة دبي في الإمارات، علاوة على إطلاق جسر جوي لتوفير إمدادات صحية بالتعاون مع برنامج الأغذية العالمي. ورابعاً تقديم الدعم ل 128 دولة حول العالم بالأدوية والإمدادات والمعدات الطبية، وساهمت بأكثر من 1742 طناً من المساعدات العاجلة، ودعمت أكثر من 1.7 مليون عامل في مجال الرعاية الطبية حول العالم. وفي الختام نؤكد على أن هناك مسؤولية أساسية على البرلمانات والاتحاد البرلماني الدولي في العمل مع الحكومات والمنظمات الدولية على ضمان الوصول العادل للقاحات المستقبلية لمواجهة كوفيد-19 أو أي أوبئة عالمية مستقبلية وتوفيرها لسكان شعوب العالم وبدون أي سياسات انتقائية أو استثناءات، باعتبار أن بناء عالم أفضل لن يكون إلا إذا كان الإنسان محوره وغايته. وشكرا.
Thank you very much. I now invite Ms. Aubrey to give us her thoughts, her comments on the interventions that we had so far and also that were posted in the chat. Please have the floor.
Merci beaucoup et merci à tous ceux qui ont pris la parole, aux collègues partout dans le monde, parce que j'ai le sentiment au moins qu'il y a une crainte partagée, il y a un combat qui est partagé, qui est celui de l'accès au vaccin. Et je suis convaincue que tant qu'on ne fixera pas des règles à ces laboratoires pharmaceutiques, alors on se privera de capacité de production. Et y compris pour répondre à ce qu'un collègue d'Allemagne indique dans le chat sur le fait que les laboratoires pharmaceutiques ont investi de l'argent, et c'est normal, entre guillemets, hein, je traduis, qu'ils aient un retour sur investissement. Je voudrais dire deux choses. Le premier, c'est que, comme je le disais au début, une grande partie de l'argent qui a été investi est aussi de l'argent public, que sans l'argent public investi par les États, les laboratoires pharmaceutiques auraient été incapables de développer ces vaccins avec cette rapidité-là. Ça, c'est la première chose. Et la deuxième chose, ce que nous disons dans la levée des brevets, c'est pas priver les laboratoires pharmaceutiques de tout revenu. On peut imaginer, par exemple, une compensation financière pour les laboratoires pharmaceutiques. J'ai pas de problème à l'envisager. Par contre, il me semble inacceptable et inenvisageable que pour une logique de profit, on se prive de capacité de production de vaccins, qui est aujourd'hui le seul outil pour sauver la planète de la catastrophe sanitaire dans laquelle nous nous trouvons. Et que je me vois mal dire à nos enfants, vous savez, dans 20 ans, en disant, bah, il y a 20 ans, il y a X millions de gens qui sont morts et on avait l'antidote, on avait de quoi freiner ça, mais on n'en a pas produit suffisamment parce qu'une poignée d'acteurs économiques préféraient faire du profit. Et je crois que la santé doit prévaloir sur toute autre considération. Et c'est le combat, nous, qu'on mène. Et dans le contexte français, le président de la République a à plusieurs reprises dit que nous étions en guerre. Bon, je pense que c'est une métaphore qui est discutable. Mais si nous sommes en guerre, alors il faut des méthodes exceptionnelles pour faire face à cette guerre. Et il se trouve que nos armes dans cette guerre-là, c'est pas des balles, mais c'est le vaccin. Et que cette arme-là, on peut en produire davantage. Et que si on ne veut pas avoir une épidémie incontrôlable qui, d'une région à une autre, d'un pays à un autre, se développe sous des formes de variants, comme c'est le cas en Inde, comme c'est le cas au Brésil, comme c'est le cas en Afrique du Sud, comme ça a été le cas au Royaume-Uni, alors il faut arrêter cette spirale. Et pour arrêter cette spirale, on n'a rien trouvé d'autre que des vaccins qui sont efficaces et qui marchent. Mais pour ça, il faut être clair, il faut en produire suffisamment pour que l'ensemble de la planète puisse y avoir accès, riches comme pauvres, pays du Nord comme pays du Sud, pays de l'Ouest comme pays de l'Est, jeunes comme plus âgés. Évidemment, on a donné la priorité aux plus âgés, mais je pense qu'il faut que l'ensemble de la population, y compris les plus jeunes, y ait accès. Voilà ce que je voulais dire en conclusion de mon intervention, c'est que on a vu, cette crise a démontré les limites de la logique du marché et que plus que jamais, la santé doit prévaloir et qu'elle doit nous obliger, je crois, par-delà nos différences politiques, à lever les brevets, au moins temporairement, pour se donner les capacités de faire face à cette crise. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your intervention and your answers. Please note that each delegation has a 2-minute intervention, and please do not forget to state your name. I now give the floor to India.
Honorable Chairperson, ma'am, and distinguished delegates. I'm Dr. Sasmit Patel of Parliament from Rajya Sabha, from the Indian Parliament. Keeping in view the emergency health crisis due to the pandemic, the Indian annual budget of 2021-22 has been given a big thrust on health expenditure, which has witnessed a growth of 137% over the previous year. Allocation of 35,000 crores of Indian rupees, which comes to 4.69 billion US dollars, has been earmarked for vaccination alone. The Indian Parliament is supplementing the efforts of government in combating the pandemic. The all-encompassing Atmanirbhar package seeks to pull the country out of coronavirus by making every single individual safe and self-reliant. Under the Vaccine Maitri initiative, India has supplied more than 66 million doses of Make in India COVID-19 vaccines to more than 90 countries across the world and nearly 20 million doses to 47 countries under the COVAX facility. India believes in the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and the whole world is our family. Accordingly, we have reached out and helped the entire globe. Further, to deal with the second wave of pandemic, many decisions have been taken on fast-track basis, like opening of COVID-19 vaccination to every person above the age of 18 years, running of Oxygen Express train by Indian Railways for transportation of liquid medical oxygen, adding up by new beds in the COVID care centers, among many other initiatives. In closing, I would like to say India has been working very hard to ensure all facilities for its migrant workers and taking care of them. We believe that the IPU has a huge role in overcoming the pandemic today, and India is committed in ensuring provision of vaccines of millions of doses ahead to many more countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Burundi.
Merci. Au niveau du Burundi, on sait que la pandémie Covid est là, et les chiffres en disent. Et le pays a développé des mesures de résilience, des mesures qui permettent à ce que le taux et le risque de contamination soient maîtrisés. C'est notamment les campagnes de sensibilisation pour le dépistage et la prise en charge des cas positifs. Les campagnes de mobilisation pour le dépistage sont pilotées par le président de la République, et le Parlement burundais suit pour les sensibilisations au niveau local, au niveau des communautés. Et au niveau du Burundi, l'incidence du Covid, quand bien même elle est là, dans toutes les entités administratives du pays, la population est en activité et le Burundi a pris la mesure que toute personne qui veut se faire dépister soit dépistée gratuitement et les cas positifs rencontrés puissent être pris en charge gratuitement. Voilà, nous avons jusqu'à présent un taux de séroprévalence de 1,4%, parce que sur 27 273 666 cas dépistés, nous avons 3 884 cas confirmés, soit 1,42%. Et le taux de décès est inférieur à 0,2%. C'est pour le moment, c'est autour de 0,15%. Alors, il y a la maîtrise de ça, mais comment développer la résilience? La première incidence du COVID-19, c'est que ça ralentit le flux transfrontalier, dont le commerce et le tourisme. Et pour que la population burundaise puisse être résiliente, c'est qu'elle puisse d'abord être autosuffisante au niveau alimentaire, parce que c'est le primordial. Et dans ce cadre, le gouvernement a mis en place des projets et programmes qui puissent permettre à ce que le pays puisse être autosuffisant au niveau alimentaire. Et dans cela, on dit arriver à l'autosuffisance alimentaire, c'est d'abord avoir le premier capital productif qui est la terre, bien l'entretenir, mais aussi avoir les intrants nécessaires. Et dans le cadre d'avancer vers l'économie verte, nous avons pu mettre en place un système de production des intrants de fertilisants agricoles, presque bio, avec moins de résidus au niveau terrestre. C'est un engrais organominéral dont l'incidence est bonne au niveau de la production, mais avec des valeurs résiduelles très faibles au niveau du sol. Alors, j'avais une question, ce n'est pas une déclaration, j'avais une question en rapport avec l'avancement vers l'économie verte post-Covid, parce que moi, nous estimons que après le Covid, l'incidence au niveau du développement sera très faible. L'incidence au niveau du développement sera très faible et le monde va courir pour rattraper le temps perdu au niveau de la production. Et nous savons qu'il y a des multinationales qui produisent, que ce soit des intrants au niveau agricole, que ce soit les semences, les fertilisants, les intrants, les produits phytosanitaires, les semences aussi. Et je me demande comment ils vont marier le besoin énorme de la production avec l'utilisation des intrants qui ont moins d'incidence sur la détérioration de l'environnement. Je me dis qu'il faudrait que les grandes multinationales qui produisent ces intrants sous un contrôle d'une institution qui puisse permettre à ce qu'il y ait un suivi rigoureux au niveau de la production de ces intrants. Ce sont mes inquiétudes et en rapport avec l'évolution vers l'économie verte après, post-Covid. Alors, le débat d'aujourd'hui va au niveau aussi des vaccins contre le Covid. Au Burundi, la vaccination contre le Covid n'a pas encore commencé. Une des raisons, c'est que même les différents types de vaccins qui sont produits ne connaissent pas en place au niveau international. Nous attendons un vaccin qui sera homologué par l'OMS et comme ça, le Burundi va se lancer à la vaccination. Mais aussi, si vous permettez, je me dis qu'il faut qu'un vaccin homologué par l'OMS puisse être accessible pour tout le monde, que ce soit pour les pauvres, que ce soit pour les pays pauvres, que ce soit pour les pays riches, que ce soit pour les jeunes, que ce soit pour les âgés. Je vous remercie. C'était ça, mes observations.
Okay, thank you very much. It seems that Kenya is no longer here, so I invite Zimbabwe to take the floor. Please note to have 2 minutes per intervention. Zimbabwe, can you hear us? Okay, it seems that our colleagues are not yet here. I invite Korea now. Korea, please have the floor.
Hello, I'm Hong Jang, member of the National Assembly of South Korea. I sincerely thank the IPU for preparing this event and also the members of the parliament from all over the world who made a lot of important remarks. And here today, I feel again that even if everything is not perfect, we must be patient and endlessly try different ways, possible ways to overcome the crisis we face. So what does it mean to run out of vaccines on this such affluent planet? It is a lack of global governance and multilateral cooperation. It is a catastrophic moral failure of world politics, as WHO says. Prior to the commercialization of vaccines, various discussions that have been held were centered on international organizations to make vaccines as a public good. However, developed countries and major pharmaceutical companies have not listened to it. There is now a factory in South Korea that produces AstraZeneca vaccine. However, even South Korea is struggling with the supply of vaccines. The problem is not the factory, not the equipment, and not the technology or the people. The problem is the intellectual property rights. I have initiated a resolution calling for a postponement of some provisions related to the COVID-19 vaccine in the TRIPS contract discussed at the WHO now to address existing international vaccine inequality. I believe governments and parliaments should speak up more active political voices for substantial change to address these vaccine inequalities. After all, safety for all of us is linked to each other. So thank you for your listening and good afternoon and good evening as this is 11 p.m. here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your contributions today. May I now invite my sorry, I think something happened with my connections. Thank you again for your contributions today. May I now invite my colleague, Senator Romero, to close the meeting.
Aquí no tengo para eso. No tengo audio. Aquí. Muy bien, un gusto haber participado de esta jornada. Obviamente que las exposiciones han significado cargarnos de nuevas ideas, de nuevas propuestas, visiones y soluciones. Y las ideas principales de esta sesión sin duda serán la base del documento final de toda la Asamblea. que se adoptará a finales de mayo. Y también en este verano se publicará un resumen de todo el debate. Cada uno de nuestros comités tendrán una sesión adicional. El Comité de Asuntos de las Naciones Unidas se reunirá el 29 de abril, mientras el Comité de Desarrollo Sostenible se reunirá el 18 de mayo. Vernos en esas sesiones. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Senator Romero, and thanks to all of the participants who joined us today. If you do want to send your questions or comments in a text form or a written form, please email them to speeches@ipu.org, and I'm sure one of my colleagues could type that again in the chat. I also direct you to the chat where we have invited people to participate in the IPU 5 questions in 5 minutes to input into our strategy document that we are working on. We will see all the members of the UN committee again on Thursday. We have a really exciting poll that we've worked out, and we'll have some voting and things that parliamentarians love. And so we'll see you all again on Thursday from 8 until 10:30 in the morning in New York. And I'll let you figure out the time zones from there. Thank you all to my colleagues in Geneva who've worked so diligently to bring this meeting to us, to our hosts in Interprify for all their support. I know it's been challenging. And thank you, Thailand, for your good wishes, and to all of you who participated, particularly in the very late hours throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you very much, and I believe this session will be broadcast at some point. Alors, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Shukran. Gracias. Have a good afternoon, and please be safe, be well, and be kind. Thank you. I'll close the meeting now.